today we are going to do a beginner sewing tutorial that's going to give you your own DIY reversible towel swimsuit cover-up for less than $20. The secret to this beginner sewing hack is vintage towels. These towels are so wonderful. They were made 50, 60 years ago. They were probably made with 100% cotton, so they were meant to last. And also, they often have two different sides to them that are both beautiful and totally usable for this project, making it the perfect canvas to work on to make a reversible piece of clothing with very minimal sewing skills. So let's get going with this thrift flip sustainable DIY swimming suit cover-up tutorial. I started with these two matching towels that I found at an antique store. I scored these in a bag of towels for $7 at the antique store. It was quite the steal. I was able to do the entire project with just the towels and some bias tape, but if you need to make your creation a little bit bigger, you could definitely just add in a third towel. I decided I wanted a swimsuit cover-up that was kind of like a cardigan, one that I could wear open or I could wear closed with a belt. And I can't believe I was actually able to pull it off. So let me tell you how I did it. There's a very simple technique to make your own cover-up with just two pieces of material. I'm going to try to illustrate this with my squiggles, so bear with me. I am not great at drawing, as you can tell. What you do is you place the two pieces on top of each other, cut down the middle of that top piece to create like the neckline, and then also on those two bottom corners, you just kind of cut out squares to form the sleeves. My two towels, they were not the right shape. They were too wide, but also too short. So I needed to modify them to try to make this work. So what I did is I cut some material from the bottom of the towels to use as my sleeves. So I went ahead, carefully measured identical pieces from the bottom of both pieces, then cut them out and set them aside for the sleeves later. Now on the body of the cover-up, I knew I was gonna need some kind of tapered neckline. Otherwise it would just kind of hang straight down like this. I needed something that would kind of fit and form this kind of shape. As you can tell from my sketches, I'm not very good at freehanding, so I decided to look around my house for something that was similar to a shape like that, and this is what I found, a wine bottle. So I put that wine bottle down on one of the towels, and I followed the shape with my disappearing ink marker. Then I went in and I cleaned up the shape and extended the lines all the way down to the bottom of the towel. And honestly, look, I mean, it worked. It worked. Next, I cut out that shape from the middle of the towel to make sure both sides were perfectly even. Once they were cut out, I put them on top of each other and I made just a little tiny trims around those edges just so they would be perfectly identical. Don't throw away any of the scraps from this project, especially that middle piece that you cut out, because you're going to use it to create a belt. Even if it's just like a tiny, tiny little scrap, it can definitely come in handy. There's some kind of magical thing that happens when you piece together pieces of towels. I'll show you what I mean in just a little bit. I then placed my two front pieces on top of what would be my back towel piece. I lined them up with the same sides touching, then pinned along the very top edge, the raw edge that I had cut the length off of. I knew that the back piece was also going to need to have kind of a slight dip in the neckline, just like any other shirt or cardigan does, just so it sits well. So of course I looked around my house for something else that could serve as a pattern, and in this case I found a cereal bowl. So I placed that down on my towels and drew along that line and then trimmed that piece out. And then it was time to start sewing. I sewed a straight stitch along both sides of that top edge, attaching the two front panels to the back piece. I did not do any sewing yet in that middle part. Then I tried my creation on. This is always a difficult time when you're in those first steps and you're not really sure what's gonna happen. I realized that the edges of the towel really fell at kind of a weird place, like out here, like football pad shoulders. So I decided I was going to need to trim that in and bring it into my actual shoulder. So what I did is I put it on and then I marked where my shoulder was on the towel. And then I went into my closet and grabbed a tank top that had wide armholes, so I knew I could create more of a relaxed, not so fitted, but still feminine fit. I placed it on the front of my towel creation and traced along that armhole line. Then I flipped the towels over and lined up the back of the tank top to the same place and traced along the back side of the armhole. This is going to make a little bit more of a tailored fit because in normal garments, the front of an armhole is a little bit different in shape than the back of an armhole. And I did this process on both sides of this towel creation and then cut along my traced lines. So the next thing I did was take one of the blocks I had trimmed from the bottom of the original towel and lined it up under the freshly cut out sleeve curve to be sure that it would line up when it's sewed on, and it just was so much easier for me to do this pattern this way. So I traced along that line and was sure to leave about a 1/2 inch extra for my seam allowance. I then went and cut along that line and trimmed off the excess on the end. Then it was time to attach the sleeves and see if this was gonna work at all. So I lined those up with the right sides facing and sewed along that curve with a straight stitch. I messed up recording this last part, but the next step is pretty simple. I'll show you with my squiggle. You're just going to do the same thing, sew a straight stitch along where the armholes are and then along the sides. And the nice thing about using towels is the sides are already finished. So the sides of this structure, minimal work needed. Those are already ready to go. You don't need to finish off any of the raw edges. Now, originally, I just finished the raw edges with a zigzag stitch, and then for the armholes, I kind of just flipped up the cuff and sewed it down just so it would be finished because I needed it for this trip that I was going on to Vegas. It worked. It worked well. I wore it to Vegas and got compliments on it. I knew it could be better because it wasn't reversible at this point. So I decided to use some bias tape to finish those edges just so I could really make sure that the frayed edges weren't going to get worse and it would just give a better clean finish to this whole thing. This was actually my first time using bias tape, so I'm not the person to be asking about this. I got help from a YouTube tutorial and I'm going to link it because she seems to really know what she's talking about and talks about a lot of different ways you could do this. She's the expert, not me. You'll see in my finished product that I made quite a few mistakes with my bias tape, but practice makes perfect, and this is a good project to practice that with. And the nice thing about finishing those raw edges inside is that it can be reversible. You'll see in just a minute what I'm talking about. But first, we need to talk about this belt because this belt was something I did not anticipate making until the end, and I didn't think I was going to have enough clippings to do it. But I found out this really cool way to attach towel fabric together. I just gathered up all of my scraps together and pinned them together and then kind of laid them on top of each other. And where they joined, I sewed a zigzag stitch across that on both sides. And it kind of just made the towel just blend into the other towel. So I was able to make a pretty long belt with just all of my scraps. And then I decided how I would finish the edges was with more double fold bias tape and added bias tape to both sides of this belt. And I think it came out pretty well. You would never know that this is really like a bunch of like 2 to 3 inch pieces of toweling all chain linked together. My belt ended up being about 2 inches wide. It's really going to depend on what kind of material and fabrics you have left if you do want to make this belt. So just kind of work with what you have. After everything was said and done and all of the raw edges were enclosed in the double fold bias tape, I was really pretty happy with the final results. So let's take a look. I have created a towel swimsuit cover up that I can wear 6 different ways. Yellow side open, flip sided so you can see both sides, belted, and then the same 3 different methods with the white side facing the front. I don't play by the rules when it comes to sewing, so if you like this tutorial and just want to see some of the simplest ways you can make something cool that's your own, I have an entire playlist of some of my other DIY projects. Thanks for watching.